We just hit the halfway mark of the year, so we thought it would be fun to sit down and go over every single book we've read so far this year and let you guys know if we think they're worth it or not.
We've read about 45 books each, and we have them here on the cards next to us. So we're gonna go through them in the order that we read them and let you guys know our honest, brutal truth about them.
First up, I read Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was like my most anticipated book for this year. It's just a book following this really known tennis player and just her life and how she's gotten to where she is. The story is so good. The characters are so good. I think anytime Taylor Jenkins Reid writes a book, that's just how I feel. I'm connected. I care about them. I want the best for them. It's very much like that movie King Richard that was based off of Venus and Serena's childhood and how they grew up and how they became who they are. There's really good life lessons, a really nice storyline as well. I definitely recommend.
My first read of the year was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. This is a sad but bizarre story about a woman who decides she wants to sleep for an entire year to escape her life. Relatable. I really love Ottessa Moshfegh's writing. This was my first book of hers. The concept was so interesting and it was a really unique read, but I didn't necessarily love the ending. So I do want to read more by her, but it was a really good start to the year. I would say it's worth it if you like satire and really good writing. Plot-wise, I don't know if it was my favorite.
Next, I read The Resurrection of Wildflowers, which is the second book in the Wildflowers duet. I personally really liked this series, but I know it's like a heavier one because it is a age gap romance. The first one ended on such a huge cliffhanger that I couldn't wait to read this one, and it was so good. I really liked it. It was like a roller coaster of emotions. I felt happy, I felt sad, I was crying, I was laughing, just all of the things. I would definitely recommend.
Up next, I have 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. In this one, we follow 6 teens who get stuck in an RV for 8 hours and only 5 survive. YA mystery thriller. This one was so good. It had me hooked from the beginning. I read it in one sitting. I did really like the ending. There were things in here that I couldn't predict. I always feel like YA mystery thrillers are really fast paced. So if you need a book that's a quick, easy read, this one's definitely it. I do think it's worth it.
Next, I have The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. There is just something about this man's writing that just gets me every single time. His plot twists, I've never seen them coming. They've always just shocked me in the best way possible. This one, I remember thinking the story was over, we've solved everything, we know what's going on, and then BAM! He hits me again with another reveal. This one is just a woman who's stalking the family across the lake. She just keeps noticing things that are going on, and she of course gets more curious and curious. I mean, it's a great story. I really like Riley Sager's writing. I think I will read anything he writes.
Up next, I have Throttled by Lauren Asher. This is book 1 in the Dirty Air series, a Formula One sports romance where he is her brother's rival. I liked this one. I thought it was going to be a little bit better. I don't really feel the need to continue on with this series. I think I'm just more into darker romances now, so contemporary romances aren't really doing it for me. But if you're a fan of sports romances, I think this one was really cool that it was Formula One and not a common sport that we normally read about.
Up next, I have the Shatter Me series. Going into this one, I was really nervous because I didn't think I was going to like this. I think in one of our videos I said I am never going to read these books, and I read them. I just finished the series like 2 days ago. I definitely enjoyed the first 3 books a lot more than the 3 books she added on later. I would say this is a fantasy dystopian because it is in a whole different world than ours, and Juliet, our main character, does have certain powers to where if she touches anyone, they automatically die. The first 3 are definitely worth it. I kind of feel like I should have stopped there though.
Up next, I have Light Lark by Alex Astor. This one I actually really enjoyed. Every 100 years, the island of Light Lark appears and gives these 6 rulers a chance to break the curses that have plagued their lands for centuries. Such a good YA fantasy. There's romance, secrets, competition. I can't wait to read the next book. Something I really love about YA fantasies is that they're really fast-paced and easy to follow. The hype for this one is real. I do think it's worth it, and I'm pretty sure they're making an adaptation for this, so read it before it comes out because it's very good.
The next one we both read is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This was our first sci-fi read, and we both really enjoyed it. This is about a man who wakes up in space and he realizes that he is the sole survivor. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know what his name is. He has no idea why he's there. But that's just barely scratching the surface of what's really going on. I actually listened to the audiobook while reading this one, and I highly recommend doing that. I think the audiobook was probably one of my favorites. And it also helps in those like scientific moments moments where you don't really know what's going on. An adaptation is about to come out. Ryan Gosling as the main character, and I can't wait to see that. How very different from him playing Ken to like
yeah,
a scientific man.
Scientist?
Yeah. I definitely recommend. I think this was a really good time.
Up next, I have books 3 and 4 in the Never After series by Emily McIntyre, Scarred and Wretched. These are all reimagined fractured fairy tales where the villains get their happy ending. This, you guys know, is my guilty pleasure series. I absolutely devour all of these. They're the perfect amount of trashy and entertaining. That's why I love these. I would say they're worth it, but they're definitely not anything revolutionary. They're just fun reads. Just a good time.
Next, I have The Housemaid and The Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden. I think the first one was really predictable, but I had a great time reading it. And I thought it was so funny because by the time I read the second book, everybody was like, this one is so predictable, and I couldn't guess what was going to happen. These are definitely very short and easy mystery thriller books to read. They're only like 200 and something pages, and they're really good page turners that keep you intrigued. I do think they are worth it.
Up next, I read Saint by Adrienne Young. This is the prequel to the Fable duet, which you guys know we love. It's a love story between a sailor and a dredger on the Narrows, the ocean. I love this world. I could read any book that she writes that's set in this universe. Adrienne Young is definitely one of my favorite authors. She just has a way of creating these beautiful worlds and stories in such a short book, so that's why I love her. This one was great. I liked the Fable duet more, but this was a great addition. I do think it's worth it, but read the other ones first.
Next, I have A Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. I gave A Good Girl's Guide to Murder 5 stars. I really loved it, so why this took me like a whole year to read the second book, I have no idea, but I loved this one too. I didn't give this one 5 stars. I think I gave it 4. The storyline was still good. We're just following 2 characters who are trying to uncover murders that are happening. Something I do love about these books is that they are written in such a cool way, because not only do we get third person, but we also get like little interview styles that make it feel really real, and we also get to see pictures of things that are going on in these cases. I do need to read the third one, but from the first 2, I definitely recommend.
Up next, I have my first adult fantasy, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. Historical fiction high fantasy, we follow Rin as she attempts to get into the most elite military academy in hopes to escape her future. This was fantastic. R.F. Kuang's writing is phenomenal. A huge step up for me just reading YA fantasy to an adult one. Super dark scenes, very descriptive writing, a lot of war happening. I do think I like the first half better than the second half, but it was so good. I do think it's worth it. Definitely check triggers though, because there were a couple scenes that were too much for myself. But overall, it was so well done. I do want to eventually read the other 2 books in this trilogy, but this one was chef's kiss.
Next, I have Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. This was my first Lucy Score book, and I really loved it. It's a small town romance. We have a grumpy sunshine. We got family drama. We got a mystery going on. It's all kinds of good things happening here. This was really so fun to read. I also loved all of the little side characters that really made this feel so cozy and true to a small town book. Definitely recommend.
Up next, I read Everything I Never Told You. This was a story about family secrets and longing. After this family loses a child, we deep dive into each of their pasts and uncover how families spend their entire lives trying to understand one another. Such a good, moving story. Not at all what I was expecting. I thought we were going to be more focused on the mystery of what happened to their child, but it was more so, like I said, deep diving into each of their relationships and how they came to be. I do think it's worth it if you need a short read, but wasn't my favorite of the year.
Up next, I have The Last Thing You Told Me by Laura Dave. This is a mystery story about a husband who goes missing, and it's up to Hannah and her stepdaughter to figure out what has happened. I really did love seeing Hannah and her stepdaughter Bailey's relationship grow. It was the most wholesome part of this whole book. I did want to read it before the adaptation came out, and we both watched it. I thought they did a really good job at making it exactly like the book. I would recommend, but don't expect any thriller or plot twist.
Up next, I have 9 by Zach Hines. In this book, humans have 9 lives, and every death is equal to a mental and physical upgrade. Our main character, Julian, is determined to stay on his first life, and he begins to discover gaps in the rebirth system that can potentially be the biggest conspiracy unleashed in their world. I thought this was so good. Super underrated book. I found it on BookOutlet, just decided to pick it up, and I'm glad I did. You guys know I love myself a YA dystopian book. I do think it's worth it. I thought this one was a really interesting concept, and I would love to see an adaptation for something like this.
Up next, we have Twisted Love by Anna Huang. This is the first book in the Twisted series. It is a brother's best friend romance book, and both of our characters have really dark pasts. Sounds great. It sounds great, but it wasn't for us, and that is okay. We also knew that a lot of people said the first one isn't even comparable to the rest of them, so
it was just disappointing for me. We both felt like the dark pasts were kind of just thrown and forced upon the characters. We don't think it needed that. It was also just really cliche and hard to get through. There were a lot of like laugh out loud moments I don't think we were supposed to be laughing at. We do want to continue with the series
one day
at some point. Not worth it. Up next, I don't know how I forgot to bring this book, but I brought the wrong Prince book. I accidentally grabbed The Cruel Prince. I read Brutal Prince this year, so that is the first book in the Brutal Birthright series by Sophie Lark. This was like a light mafia romance. It was arranged marriage. I was super excited for it, and it kind of just missed the mark for me. I think I want my mafia romances to be a little bit darker. I do want to try to read a different series by this author because I know she has a bunch, but this one was just okay. I don't necessarily think it's worth it unless you're trying to get into slightly darker romances, but I don't think it was for me.
The next book I have I don't actually own, but it is Matthew Perry's memoir that he just came out with, and it's called Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. I was interested in reading this one because I always have Friends on, and Chandler Bing is one of my like favorite characters ever. I've always known that he was kind of struggling behind the cameras. I just never really understood exactly why. So it was really nice to understand exactly what he was going through and see a different side of him and how he saw things while filming the show. I do think it's worth it if you do like Friends and you do like Chandler Bing and you want to know a little bit more about him. But if you don't like that show, then no.
Up next, I have Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I wanted to read this book because the adaptation is one of my comfort movies, and I wanted to experience the story in a different form. So I actually annotated this while I was reading. It was so good, such a fun, spooky read. I know this author has a bunch of different children's books that I do want to read, like The Graveyard and other ones. I would recommend it for spooky time. Definitely worth it if you like the movie.
Up next, I have Kristen Hanna's The Nightingale. I absolutely love this one. Looking back, I see I gave it 4.5 stars, and I have no idea why I didn't just give it the full 5. This is a historical fiction book set in 1939 in France, and we are in the middle of a war. We're following 2 different sisters, and we are just seeing how different their experiences are in this war. They're both doing things to try and help their community, but they both have such different storylines, and they're 2 completely different people, but it's such a great and powerful story. I cannot wait for the adaptation to come out because Miss Elle and Dakota Fanning are going to be playing these 2 sisters, and I could completely see that. I'm so excited to see which one's gonna play which. Definitely recommend this one.
Up next, I have If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. One of my favorite reads of the year. We're following Autumn and Finn, who were inseparable growing up, but now things have changed and they do their best to ignore each other. Autumn keeps wondering what life would be like if he had been with her. Beautiful, tragic love story, a YA book, and yet it made me feel everything and more. I know the author is coming out with a book in the guy's point of view. I don't think I can read it because I don't want to go through all of this again, but it was such a powerful and moving story. I cried my eyes out. I definitely think it's worth it. It's worth the hype and worth the read. Definitely a memorable one. I loved it.
Up next, I have Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I know everyone was saying that if you're in your 20s, you have to read this book. And so when I went into it, I was thinking that I was going to get some really valuable life lessons, and I felt like it was more of just like an entertainment story. I think it's worth it if you're into all of these things that they had crossed out.
Up next, I have A Seventh Circle by Tate James. This is book 1 in the Madison Kate spin-off series. It's a dark Why Choose romance. I absolutely loved this book, but I do recommend reading the Madison Kate series first. There's different gangs in this town. We're following different characters. Tate James has become one of my favorite authors of all time. I do think it's worth it, but read the Madison Kate series first.
Up next, I have Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blau. This one was so unexpected for me. I really enjoyed this one. We're following a young girl who has lived in a very conservative household. Her parents are really strict. She gets introduced to a different family who has very different morals. She's just seeing another side of the world. It's fun to be in her point of view because she's so young, and it was just really fun to view the world through a young person's eyes. I will say the ending did feel a little bit rushed, but I can't be mad because it went so quick. It was less than 300 pages, so obviously they had to wrap it up. A very good book. I definitely recommend.
Up next, I have We Are the Brendans by Tracy Lange. We follow a girl named Sunday who moved away and has been living on her own for a while when an accident has her returning home and facing the past that she left behind 10 years ago. Family drama, lots of secrets. We're following a lot of different people. I thought it was solid. There's not too much else to say about it. I don't know if I would necessarily think it's worth it. You gave it a 5 stars. I think I gave it a 3.
I love drama. I live for the drama. I think if you want to sit down and read a whole family and all their tea, yes. If not, no. Up next, I have The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins. I have to be honest, I don't even remember what happens here. I just remembered that I was able to predict it and that our characters were so unlikable. I just couldn't wait to not be reading this book anymore, which is so sad because this is the same author who does The Ex-Hex, and I really like that, but I guess I just like her romance books more. I can't with this book. I just couldn't, I can't, I won't, I'm done. So this is a no for me.
Up next, I have Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This is a collection of short stories that takes place in a coffee shop in Japan that is said to allow time travel. Super emotional, sad read. All of these had me tearing up. I do think it's worth it. I've said before that I have a hard time with short stories because it gives me too many opportunities to put the book down, but it didn't happen with this one. I was thoroughly interested in each one of them, and I did love that they're all kind of connected since they do take place at the same shop. We have those reoccurring characters that work there, so it was nice to have things kind of tied together in that way. I definitely recommend. I do think it was worth it.
Next I have Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. This is a crazy psychological mystery thriller. We're following a woman who lost her daughter 10 years ago. She hasn't seen her, she doesn't know if she's alive, she doesn't know if she's dead. This woman ends up dating a man whose daughter looks exactly like her kid. This one was actually surprising because I wasn't expecting the readers to be shown what has happened very early on, and we're just waiting for the mom to uncover it herself and figure it out on her own. I think I would have liked it a lot more if we got to uncover it with her. I gave this a 4 stars, but I think I could have easily given it a 5 if we got that chance to uncover everything with her. I am really happy though that this is my first Lisa Jewell book that I read. I think her writing was so good and I can't wait to read more from her.
Up next, I read Promises and Pomegranates by Sav R. Miller. This was a dark mafia Hades and Persephone retelling, and I was thoroughly disappointed this entire time. I will say it started off strong and then it just got worse and worse as it went on. I think this author's writing is just not for me. I've read better mafia romances. I've read better Hades and Persephone retellings. It wasn't worth it for me, but I know a lot of people love this series, so I don't know what the disconnect was, but I know there was one.
Next I have The Bodyguard by Catherine Senner. This one was so cute. We're following a woman who is the bodyguard to the man. We have a little bit of fake dating, some more family drama going on. This was definitely a slow burn and there was no smut, which I wasn't expecting just because, you know, these cartoon covers, they're always the craziest ones. That was really shocking to me, but I also do like there are really popular romance books out there for readers who want a slow burn with no smut. So if you're into that, this one is for you.
Up next, I have Gallant by V.E. Schwab. In this one, we're following an orphan named Olivia. She has a gift and has nothing connecting her to her past except for her mother's journal. Once she's summoned to the Gallant house, she feels like she finally has a place to call home until she begins uncovering secrets about her family's past. This was such a spooky, eerie read. I loved it. I loved the writing. It was atmospheric without being too wordy. I kind of wish I would have saved it for October, so that's when I recommend it, but I do think it was worth it.
Next, we both have Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This was actually our first book club book. This is a sports romance book. We're following Anastasia and Nate. Anastasia is a figure skater and Nate is the captain of the hockey team at this school. They get off on the wrong foot and they end up having to share the ice skating rink for the rest of the school year. There was a lot of mixed reviews on this one. I think because it was so off-putting with how smutty it was. For the romance itself, I thought it was really cute. I liked them together. I liked meeting all the other people that we're eventually going to get books about. I know I definitely like some of the boys in the hockey team a lot, and I want to know how their romance is going to go, so I do think I'm going to continue the series. I think it's worth it. I think it's a nice, smutty sports romance.
I think this one's always fun to do because we have differing opinions on it. I would say it's not worth it. I've just read other sports romances that I've liked more. I don't necessarily get the hype on this one. It was nothing new, and I thought some of the scenes were just unnecessary, not even the smut ones. There were just some weird things that happened that I didn't understand why they were put in. I do appreciate it for the banter, but I didn't necessarily love it. So look more into it and decide if you think it's something that you would like. I did start the Harry Potter series this year because I grew up watching the movies and I wanted to read the books. I did read the first 3 books in the series, but I only own 2 of them so far. I really enjoy being able to learn more details about the world and the characters that were left out of the adaptations. I have been listening to the audiobooks for these. It's the perfect series for me to do that because I know the story, I'm familiar with the characters. So I've had a great time with them so far. I do think the books are worth it, especially if you grew up loving the movies like me. And since they're making a new series adaptation, I'm wondering how much more they're gonna include that weren't included in the movies.
Up next, I have the very beloved The Mind F series by St. Abby. I can't believe I waited so long to read this. I remember last year Lauren was like raving about it all the time, about how much she loved it, and she was completely right. I gave this 5 stars. It does look intimidating, but this is books 1 through 5. Each book does end on such a shock factor that you don't even realize. You're just like speeding right through it. And this one we're following a female serial killer who ends up dating the FBI agent who is working on her case. I definitely recommend, we definitely recommend, but please check your trigger warnings because there are a lot in here. This definitely made me realize though how much I love a female revenge plot.
Up next, I have Electric Idol by Katie Robert. This is book 2 in the Dark Olympus series. In this one, we're following Psyche and Eros. I initially was not going to continue on with this series because I did not love book 1, Neon Gods. We ended up finding this in a little free library. I read it and I'm so glad I did because this one actually is making me consider reading the rest of the series. I like this one a whole bunch more. I do recommend this one. Even if you didn't like Neon Gods, I would read this one.
Up next, we have Indigo Ridge by Devaney Perry. This is the first book in the Eden series. This is a small town romance with some murder mystery in there. Our female main character is the chief of police, and she ends up finding a body on her love interest's property. Sounds great. Sounds fantastic. It just wasn't for us, and that is okay.
I know we both felt like the romance was a little forced in this one. It didn't feel like it necessarily had to be there. While the mystery was solid, it was nothing special. And I think that's why it was disappointing because this is such a hyped series and we just didn't love this one.
Yeah, the romance felt forced and then we didn't get introduced to other Eden boys really to know and love them and want to read the next book. I think this is just a no for us.
Up next is a book I don't physically own, but I read the ebook, and it is The Inmate by Frida McFadden. Burke is the new nurse practitioner at this penitentiary. The only issue is one of the inmates is not only her ex, but the reason he's locked up is because of her. Such a good concept. Something about Frida McFadden's writing I think is just definitely 100% not for me. I know she's super popular in the mystery thriller genre right now. I think that's why I was excited to read it. No disrespect to the author. One of the worst books I've read so far this year. There was a lot of moving aspects I just didn't really love about it. I will say it read fast. That's the only positive thing I have to say about it. And if you want like a really quick mystery read, go for it. I go a lot more in depth in our April wrap up when I read it. I rant on about it, so if you really want to know my thoughts, watch that. I personally don't think it was worth it. However, if you're a fan of Frida McFadden or you're wanting a fast mystery, try it out for yourself.
Up next, I have The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. Basically, we're following Stella. She does have Asperger's, so she knows she has problems communicating with people and just feeling certain emotions. So she ends up wanting to hire Michael, who works in a profession that can try and help her out a little bit. And it's just their cute romance after that. Both of our characters are super likable. I do like that this book shows representation of Asperger's. I definitely did not love, though, that there was a lot of miscommunication and this was an insta-love book. Both of those are my least favorite tropes, which was sad because I did really like these characters together. I just didn't want to read about all of that. I do think it's worth it if you're fine with those tropes, but if you're like me and you don't want to read those, then I'm going to say no.
So up next, I have books 1 and 2 in the Darkverse series by Runex, my favorite mafia romance to date. We are following Morena and Tristan in these first 2 books. Morena breaks into Tristan's house intent on killing him, but then they end up having to work together when a 20-year-old mystery resurfaces. Such a good plot, characters, and romance. I had been waiting for a mafia romance that I could really get behind because a lot of times with dark romances, the romance will be there, but the plot will kind of just be average. That was not the case with these 2. I devoured these in one sitting. I actually read these back to back on Kindle Unlimited, and then afterwards I knew I had to own the physical copies. I do want to continue with this series. I highly recommend. I know that as the series goes on, we follow different characters, so I can't wait to read about them, but definitely worth it. Some of my favorites of the year.
Up next, we have Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. this says it perfectly. The perfect marriage or the perfect lie. We're just seeing what's going on behind closed doors. It's a domestic thriller. I thought it was good. It was fast-paced. It was short. I thought it was really obvious what was going to happen, but I did enjoy the journey to the end, and the last page specifically was so well written. I really liked that.
I will agree that the last page was good. I don't think I liked the rest of this book. A huge issue for me was I didn't like the main character. I also thought the plot was very rushed and underdeveloped. I thought the man, I always hate the men in domestic thrillers, but this one specifically was just like psycho in a weird way. Another one that has such high ratings on Goodreads and just wasn't for me. I don't personally think it was worth it, but to each their own, because I know you loved it. Up next, I have a YA mystery, The Lies I Tell by Gillian French. In this one, there's a fire that kills everyone in the Garrison family. Everyone suspects Pearl's dad did it because he was a caretaker of the Garrison family's house, and he is known as the town drunk. However, Pearl does not think this is true. She's determined to uncover the truth. This was another one of those that I found on BookOutlet and just wanted to try reading. A good summer vibes type of book. I thought it had a solid ending. Would I say it was necessarily worth it though? I'm gonna go no.
Up next, I have The Selection by Kira Cass. This was so good. I gave it a 5 stars. It was The Hunger Games and The Bachelor in one. For 35 girls, The Selection is the chance of a lifetime. This is a super easy and fast-paced YA dystopian. There's also a love triangle going on in there, and both guys are fantastic. I don't even know how to feel at this point. I can't believe I waited so long to start this series, and now that I finished Shatter Me, I am ready to devour this one as well.
Up next, I read book 6 in the Zodiac Academy series, Fated Throne. You guys already know. This is probably one of my most talked about series. Fantasy, bully romance. It gives adult Harry Potter. We have 2 twin sisters who grew up in the mortal world. They are brought to the Fey realm where they have to learn to harness their power and defend their throne from the 4 heirs trying to steal it. This series has my entire heart. You guys already know I am ride or die for this series. Every book gets more insane and dire. They're all so steamy and entertaining. I do see why people think it takes a couple books to really get into it. For me, I was hooked from the start. I do agree that this series is kind of trashy, but it's the good kind of trashy, and I love it. I can't wait to finish off this series, hopefully this year. I do think it's worth it.
Next is Red, White, and Royal Blue. I was so late to the game with this one. In this one, we're following the Prince of Wales and the son of the President of the United States. These 2 characters do start out as enemies, and I kind of wish they had a little bit more of that enemies to lovers banter. In all romance books, it just happens so fast, and I want to enjoy that little enemy banter. But it was a really fun rom-com. Their romance was so sweet and genuine. I've been seeing so many teasers for the movie that's about to come out, and I can't wait to watch this. I definitely recommend this one.
Up next, I have Agatha Christie's And Then They Were None, a classic. 10 strangers are summoned to a private island. Once they get there, they discover they all have one thing in common, and someone starts picking them off one by one. This was my first Agatha Christie. I really enjoyed it. It had me guessing until the end. I can see why she is such a staple in this genre. I do want to read more by her. I do think it took me a little bit to get into this type of writing, but once I did, I was hooked. I definitely think this one's worth it though. I think it was probably one of the best ones I could have started with.
Following that, we have Alice Feeney's Daisy Darker. This is a murder mystery thriller, and it was inspired by Agatha Christie's And Then They Were None. We're following the Darker family, and they are all trapped on an island, and they begin getting killed off one by one. We both really enjoyed this one. I think I do really like Alice Feeney because this one was really freaking good, and Rock, Paper, Scissors was so good too. Every time she put something out, I know I'm going to want to read it. There were a few predictable things, but there was also a lot that threw us off in the end, so it made up for it. This one was really fun to read together as a book club because we got to see everybody's different thoughts and opinions and predictions. I recommend this one. I thought it was a good time.
Up next, I have Carball by Stephanie Garber. In this one, we're following a girl named Scarlett. She has dreamed of attending Carball, this magical competition that happens once a year where the audience are the participants. Scarlett finally gets invited this year, but things take a turn when she realizes that this year's challenge involved her sister getting kidnapped, and the first person who finds her wins the game.
That sounds great.
It does sound great. I hate that I had so many flops this year, but this one just was super disappointing for me. I thought it was going to be more about reading the actual games and the challenges, and this was a lot about Scarlett's internal struggles. I also was very disappointed in the ending, so much so that even though I own the rest of the books, I don't necessarily want to keep going. I personally would say I didn't think it was worth it, but I do think if I would have read this a long time ago, I probably would have liked it a little bit more.
Up next, I have Finley Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead, which is the second book in the Finley Donovan series. I always compare this one to Dead to Me with Christina Applegate and Linda Cardellini on Netflix. It's very much suburban mom who has no business being involved in a murder mystery. We follow two ladies who have such a fun friendship, and they are literally ride or die for each other. It's definitely a fun and light mood, cozy murder mystery. I definitely did like the first book more, but I do think this one was still good. I would recommend the series.
Up next, I have One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This is a queer rom-com that has time travel involved. We're following August, who meets a girl on the subway named Jane, and August realizes that Jane might not be from our time. This one was super fun, lighthearted read. I did think this was a really sweet romance, and the ending was good, so I would say it's worth it.
Next, I have Truly Devious by Marina Johnson. This one is set at a famous private school, and we're following really bright students who have been invited to continue on their education there. But at this academy, there was a past murder, and our main character is just trying to figure out what has happened. And then there also seems to be a murder going on right now in the present time as well. I personally don't know what it was about this book that I just didn't connect with. I didn't find myself interested in the past or present mysteries. I liked the kids. I thought they were all cool. I thought they were all funny, but I just wanted to see them hang out. Like, I didn't really care about the mystery, which is so sad. So for me personally, I would not recommend.
The next one I have is called Dark Shores by Danielle L. Jensen. I originally picked this one up because this author has a duet that I was obsessed with last year. This one I wasn't loving as much. Basically, in this world, there's an east and a west, but either side doesn't know of the other's existence. The only people who know about both and can travel between them are the Marin people. And basically, there's a new emperor, finds out there's another side, and kidnaps the Marin people in hopes that they will show him how to travel to the other side to conquer. There's a little bit of a romance, but for a YA fantasy, it was a lot of politics, a little too much, and there wasn't enough world building for me to really care about the politics. So I'm gonna say it wasn't worth it. However, Danielle L. Jensen has a duet called The Bridge Kingdom. Such a good series. I would say that's worth it, not so much this one.
Up next, I have My Dark Vanessa. This is just a general fiction book, but it is a very strong story. We are following a young girl and her relationship with her teacher. This was so heartbreaking and disturbing. I did enjoy that we got to get both past and present timelines of Vanessa's story, just so we can see how she was feeling while she was going through this relationship and then how she is currently right now. It was really hard to read, but it was even harder to put down, just because I wanted to know what was going to happen, and I thought it was a really good story. I would recommend this if it is something that you would want to read about.
Up next, I have possibly the largest book I've ever read, and it is Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas, the last book in the Throne of Glass series. You guys know I gave it 5 stars, fantastic ending to a phenomenal series. Sarah J. Maas just knows how to do it well. Not only does she create these beautiful, fantastic worlds, but the way she writes about these characters is unmatched. Even though we always have a main character, her writing does a good job of having us fall in love with the entire ensemble of characters. You guys know I'm definitely gonna say it's worth it. All the hype it gets, I think it's deserved.
We have both been continuing on with the Calloway Sisters series this year. We talk about these books all the time. Basically, there's just 6 best friends and we're following their relationships. They're super rich and they live luxurious lives. I love them so much, but I'm ready to see how their stories are gonna end, and I'm ready to move on.
I do think it's worth it if you start the series and you fall in love with the characters. However, it is a super long series, so just know that going into it. Make sure you want to commit to 10 books before you start. Up next, I have Gleanings by Neil Shusterman. This is the newest addition to the Arc of Scythe universe, and this was a bunch of short stories that he worked on with different authors. This is set in a world where humans get to live forever, and we get to follow the only people who can take life. Why wouldn't you want to read it? We always highly recommend the first Arc of Scythe trilogy, and then I do think this one is worth reading after that.
We both read Mimi at the Lake by Carly Fortune. We're following Fern and Will, who did meet 9 years ago. They had this one really special magical day, and now we're back in present time where they're getting another chance to fall in love. Second chance romance is never my favorite trope. I didn't even like this man. This man was so obnoxious. I wanted her to be with literally anybody else.
This one was super disappointing, especially after loving Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I don't know what it was about this book. It just wasn't it. I don't think either one of us think it was worth it. Up next, we have another book we both read, and it is possibly the most popular book right now, Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. This was one of our book club books. We basically just follow Violet as she's thrown into the most brutal and dangerous Dragon Rider college that they have. We liked it.
I give it 5 stars. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I think about these people all the time. I wonder how they're doing. I wonder what's going on. But then again, I haven't read that many fantasy books, so I don't really have much to compare it to. I know you said it reminds you of a whole bunch of different things. I mean, I definitely enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend.
Overall, I do think it was worth it. I'm hoping we get a little more world building in the second book. I don't necessarily know if it deserves all of the hype that it's getting, but I do think it's worth the read.
Up next, I have my first Ellen Hilderbrand book that I've ever read, and it is The Hotel in Nantucket. This is seriously like the show Below Deck, but a hotel. So we're following the guests, we're following everybody who works there. So many different plot lines that keeps it entertaining and moving and fast-paced. This was everything I want and need in a summer book. I cannot wait to read more of her books. I definitely have a little stack piled up already. I was really surprised with this, and I'm so happy I loved it. Definitely recommend.
Up next, I have Blade of Secrets by Trisha Levenseller. This is a quick fantasy read. We're following Ziva, and she crafts magical weapons. When she accidentally creates a blade powerful enough to topple kingdoms, she decides to run away with it in hopes that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Something I love about these YA fantasies is that they're really easy to get into, they're fast-paced, they're easy to read, and they're easy to digest. I didn't realize that there is a sequel to this, so I do think I want to pick that up. I do think it's worth it if you're looking for a kind of beginner fantasy. I will say though, I like the Daughter of the Pirate King duet more than this.
Next, I have No Exit by Taylor Adams. This was a super popular mystery thriller book. Basically, there's a blizzard going on, and this girl finds herself stopped at a rest stop with a whole bunch of other people, and she ends up noticing something really disturbing in one of the cars. I was so excited to read this, but I wasn't expecting us to right away find out who is responsible for this disturbing event. Really quickly, it just became a survival book, and I just don't think that was entertaining for me or something that I enjoy reading. I don't think there was anything necessarily wrong with this author's writing. I think I just don't like that type of plot, so I wouldn't recommend unless you would like to read a survival book.
So the last one I have is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, my most recent 5-star read. Super short sci-fi. Area X has been cut off from the rest of the world for decades. We're sent into Area X and basically are trying to figure out what's happening there and how to keep it from spreading to the rest of the world. Such an atmospheric read. The writing was fantastic. I was hooked the whole time. I know there's a movie adaptation, but I heard it's vastly different. I don't know why you would change anything in this book because I thought it was perfect the way it is. I definitely think it's worth it. It's a little strange though. I would say it's odd, but it's such a short read. I would just recommend to go ahead and try it out because I loved it.
And the last one for today is My Policeman. You guys, I wanted to love this one so bad, but I just thought it was really slow. This book is set in the 1950s, and we're following a man and a woman who are in love with the same policeman. The policeman is played by Harry Styles in the movie. I think that's what kept me going because I just kept imagining Harry Styles as the policeman, and I was like, I understand, I get it. I think I just really did not like being in the girl's point of view. She was so unlikable. I couldn't stand her. I think I would have enjoyed this book more if we got to be in the policeman's point of view. We were just seeing these two characters kind of fight over him, and I wanted to be in his point of view to see how do you truly feel. I know a lot of people do say the adaptation is better, so I am interested in watching it. The book, I'm gonna have to say no.
That is all 90 books we've read so far this year. I feel like we have a good mix of things.
It's crazy to think that this is a whole half year worth of books. So by the end of the year, we should have
Double.
Yeah.
I like doing this because we were kind of able to reflect on everything that we've already read. A lot of these I kind of forgot about, so it was nice to go back and revisit them. I can't believe 6 months has already passed. Maybe we'll do one of these at the end of the year to add on with everything else we read.
We should, and then do what has been the best
out of all of them.
Yes. I'm proud of us. I think we've done a great job. I can't wait to see what the rest of the year has in store for us. Comment down below and let us know what some of your favorite books so far in the year.
And what you're excited to read for the second half of the year. That's pretty much it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we will see you next time.
Next up, I have the selection series.
Shatter me!
It's because I just looked at the selection one.
All of these are always super spicy and juicy. So funny. Spicy and juicy. He's like talking about a gusher.
Juicy how?
Juicy, like, you know. Oh!
Like, okay.
Up next, I read book 6 in the Zodiac Academy. They discover they're actually Fae on their 18th birthday. They're whisked They're whisked. Whisked? I can't say whisked. Whisked.
Finally read.
Oh, me too.
I finally read. That's getting me. I finally read Red, White, and Royal Blue. I think I like Riley Sager. I mean, I think I like Alice Sweeney.
I was like, okay.